China just placed a massive bet on an airplane that does not officially exist yet. China Southern, one of the biggest cargo carriers on the planet, has committed billions of dollars to Boeing's newest freighter, the 777X. At the first glance, that looks like a clean win for Boeing. But there is a catch, and it is a big one. The 777X program, the one this freighter belongs to, is still not certified. It has been delayed for years. Airlines around the globe are still sitting around waiting for jets that were supposed to arrive a long time ago. And yet, one of China's biggest operators just signed up anyway. So why would anyone commit real money to a plane that has not even flown a paying passenger or hauled a single ton of cargo commercially? And why does this one order matter so much more than it looks like on paper? That is exactly what we are digging into today. Let's start with what was actually signed, because the details here tell a story on their own. China Southern's cargo division ordered 5 firm 777-8F freighters. That is, the brand new aircraft. The one still deep in flight testing with no finished production example flying commercial routes yet. On top of that, the airline locked in options for 3 more, giving itself room to grow the order later if it wants to. But here's the part that a lot of headlines glossed over. The same contract also includes 2 firm 777 freighters, the current generation jet that is already flying cargo routes today, right now, with no waiting involved. That detail is not just a footnote. It tells you exactly how China Southern is thinking. This is not a company blindly throwing money at Boeing's future. They are pairing a guaranteed, ready-now aircraft with a longer-term bet on where the market is heading. In other words, they need lift capacity immediately, and they are willing to wait for the rest. Now let's talk about the price tag, because it is enormous. At Boeing's published list prices, the 7 firm aircraft alone add up to somewhere around $3.6 billion. If China Southern eventually exercises all 3 of its options, the total order value climbs to roughly $5.24 billion. And that is before any of the discounts that airlines almost always negotiate behind closed doors. China Southern has already said publicly that it secured what it called a significant discount. So the real number Boeing is booking internally is almost certainly lower than the headline figure. Neither side has revealed exactly how much lower. Deliveries are scheduled to arrive in waves, starting in 2027 and stretching all the way out to 2034. That is nearly a decade of rollout for a single order, which gives you a sense of just how long-term this bet really is. Here is why this particular deal stands out from every other freighter order Boeing has booked recently. This makes China Southern the very first mainland Chinese carrier to ever order the 777-8F. Not the second, not one of several, the first. For Boeing, that is a genuinely important milestone. It is one of the company's first meaningful commercial wins. Inside China, after years of almost total silence in that market. A silence largely driven by ongoing trade tension between Washington and Beijing. And this deal did not happen in a vacuum. It follows reports of a much bigger conversation happening at a much higher level, involving talk of roughly 200 Boeing jets as part of a broader trade arrangement between the two countries. We will come back to that in a moment, because the timing of all of this is not a coincidence, not even close. So why is China Southern actually doing this? In its own regulatory filing, the airline pointed to 3 specific reasons. First, continued growth in cross-border e-commerce, the kind of rapid parcel and freight expansion that has been reshaping air cargo demand for years. Second, industrial upgrading, as more Chinese manufacturers push their products into international markets and need faster, more reliable ways to move goods overseas. And third, national strategy, specifically the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau Greater Bay Area Initiative and the Belt and Road Initiative, both of which are central to how Beijing wants to position southern China as a logistics and trade hubs. Put simply, more Chinese goods need to move by air, faster, to more places around the world. Officially, the airline is calling this order fleet optimization, but underneath that fairly bland corporate language is a company positioning itself for a very specific vision of where global trade is heading over the next decade. Before we get into the airplane itself, it's worth pausing on just how unusual it is for an airline to pay real money, billions of dollars, for something it has never seen fly a single revenue mission. Airlines do this more often than you might think, but it is still a genuine leap of faith every single time. You are essentially trusting a manufacturer's engineering promises, its production timeline, and its certification roadmap, none of which are guaranteed. China Southern is not naive about this. The airline operates one of the largest 777 freighter fleets in the world already, close to 20 aircraft according to recent fleet data, so it knows the 777 family intimately. That existing relationship with the airframe is almost certainly part of why the airline was comfortable placing this bet. It is not jumping into a completely unfamiliar aircraft type. It is upgrading within a family it already trusts, flies, and maintains at scale. Now that we know what was signed and why, let's actually look at what this airplane is, because the specs matter for understanding why airlines are lining up for it even before it exists. The 777-8F is the freighter version of Boeing's 777X family. Think of the 777X as an entire model lineup, similar to how a car manufacturer releases a new generation across several different vehicles built on the same underlying architecture. The 779 is the passenger version, the one designed to carry people on long-haul routes. The 777-8F is the cargo hauler, built on that same core platform but re-engineered specifically to move freight. It is derived from the 777 freighter that is already flying today, but with meaningful upgrades layered on top of that existing design. Start with payload capacity. The 777-8F has a maximum structural payload of around 118 tons. To put that in perspective, that is roughly equivalent to the combined weight of 90 small cars, all loaded onto a single aircraft. Then there's cargo volume. The 777-8F offers about 17% more space than the current generation 777 freighter, with room for 31 main deck pallets instead of fewer, pushing total volume to somewhere around 766 cubic meters, up from roughly 653. And range is just as important as capacity when you are talking about long-haul freight. This aircraft can fly around 5,000 nautical miles, which works out to more than 9,000 kilometers, while still carrying 110 tons of cargo. That combination, heavy payload and long range in the same airframe without needing a fuel stop, is exactly what makes this jet attractive to carriers moving goods across oceans and continents. There's one more detail about the 777X family that is worth knowing, because it is genuinely one of the more unusual engineering decisions in modern commercial aviation. The 777X has the largest wingspan of any Boeing commercial jet ever built, made possible in part by new composite wing technology. But those wings are so long that they would not fit into existing airport gates and taxiways designed around older generation aircraft. Boeing's solution was to give the 777S folding wingtips, a feature almost never seen on commercial airliners. The outer sections of the wing fold upward on the ground, so the aircraft can use standard gates, then unfold automatically before takeoff. It sounds almost like something out of a fighter jet program, and in fact, folding wings have historically been far more common on carrier-based military aircraft than on commercial airliners. That single design choice alone added enormous engineering and certification complexity to a program that was already struggling to stay on schedule. The engines are another piece of this story worth understanding. The 77X family, including the 777-8F, is powered exclusively by General Electric's GE9X, the largest and most powerful commercial jet engine ever built, with a fan diameter wider than the fuselage of a Boeing 737. That engine alone has gone through its own lengthy and expensive development and certification process, running in parallel with the airframe's own struggles. When people talk about the 77X program burning through more than $15 billion in accumulated costs and overruns, a meaningful share of that complexity traces back to marrying a brand new record-setting engine to a brand new composite wing with moving folding tips, all while trying to meet certification standards that regulators have made considerably stricter since the aftermath of the 737 MAX crashes. Now let's get into the part of this story that makes the whole situation genuinely surprising, because the 777X program's track record has been rough, and it has been rough for a long time. The program was originally launched all the way back in 2013. It was supposed to enter commercial service in 2020. That is not a minor slip. That is more than half a decade of delay and counting, with the target date sliding backward year after year, almost like clockwork. In August of 2024, Boeing paused flight testing entirely after engineers discovered damage to a structural component connecting the engines to the airframe. Testing did not resume until design fixes addressed that problem. By October of 2025, Boeing had already taken a $4.9 billion charge on the program in a single quarter alone. When you add up the total accumulated costs and overruns across the entire life of the program, the figure now exceeds $15 billion. That is an almost unbelievable amount of money to spend before a single commercial flight has taken off. And more recently, industry reporting has indicated that certification and entry into service for the freighter variant has slipped even further, with some accounts now pointing toward 2028 rather than the earlier 2027 target that Boeing had been promising customers. There's been some genuinely good news mixed in with all of that trouble, though, and it is worth being fair about it. In May of 2026, the first production standard 7779 built for launch customer Lufthansa completed its maiden flight, a real milestone after years of setbacks. In June, Boeing cleared a major certification checkpoint known as TIA Phase 4B, which is a key testing authorization step that has to happen before final approval can be granted. So the program is genuinely moving forward. It is not stuck in place, but it is not finished either. Certification of the passenger 777 Marine reshape 9 alone is still pending, and the freighter variant, the 777-8F, sits even further behind that in the queue, since Boeing needs to nail down the passenger jet certification before the freighter can fully follow. Production of the first 777-8F airframe reportedly began in the middle of 2025, with the fuselage and composite wings mated together earlier this year, and reports suggest a first flight of the freighter could happen before the end of 2026. So this is a program in motion, but it is a program that has burned through billions of dollars and years of promises without a single commercial delivery to show for it yet. It also helps to zoom out and remember why this program exists in the first place. Boeing launched the 777X back in 2013 to replace an aging fleet of 747 and older 777 freighters that airlines around the world were going to need to retire eventually anyway, especially as tighter international emission standards start kicking in later this decade. The freighter variant, specifically, is being positioned as a direct successor to the Boeing 747-400 freighter, a jet that airlines have relied on for hauling oversized and heavy cargo for decades, but that is now old, thirsty on fuel, and increasingly expensive to keep flying under modern environmental rules. So there's a real structural reason airlines need something like the 777 and 8F to exist, delays or not. The alternative is flying increasingly old, increasingly costly aircraft for years longer than anyone wants to. Quick pause here. If you're the kind of person who actually wants to understand what's happening in aviation, not just watch pretty airplane footage, this channel breaks down the business side, the delays, the politics, and the numbers behind stories like this one every week without picking a side between Boeing and Airbus. If that sounds useful to you and you're not subscribed yet, now's a good time. All right, back to it. Here's the reality check, plain and simple. China Southern just committed billions of dollars to an aircraft that has not been certified, has not entered commercial service, and belongs to a program that is already years behind its original schedule. That is a genuinely bold bet, and it raises an obvious question. Why would an airline sign up for that kind of uncertainty right now, in this exact moment? Because the timing of this deal lines up with something much bigger than a single freighter contract. Back in May of 2026, United States President Donald Trump met with Chinese President Xi Jinping specifically to work through and ease trade tensions between the two countries. In the aftermath of that meeting, reports began circulating that China had discussed purchasing as many as 200 Boeing aircraft as part of a broader trade arrangement between the two nations. Boeing's own leadership later suggested that number could grow even further once individual contracts actually got finalized and signed. Roughly a month after that high-level meeting, this freighter order was formally signed and disclosed in a regulatory filing. That sequence of events is not a coincidence. It is a direct thread running from a presidential meeting to a specific multi-billion-dollar aircraft order. For Boeing, this order is a high-profile, symbolically important win inside the world's second-largest aviation market, arriving after years of almost no meaningful commercial activity there. It signals improving relations between the United States and China, at least for the moment, and it keeps momentum alive for the 777X freighter program at exactly the point when Boeing badly needs proof that airlines around the world still believe in it, despite everything that has gone wrong. For China Southern, the calculation runs in the opposite direction, but points toward the same outcome. This order strengthens one of Asia's top cargo carriers, a company already ranked among the 10 largest in the world by cargo traffic, and it reduces the airline's reliance on belly cargo space tucked inside passenger jets by building out a dedicated, modernized freighter fleet instead. Both sides walk away from this deal with something they badly wanted. So how does this aircraft actually stack up against the competition? Because Boeing is not just racing against its own internal delays here, it is also racing against Airbus. And by most measures right now, Airbus is ahead. The direct rival to the 777-8F is the Airbus A350F. As of this year, the A350F has passed the 100 firm order mark from more than a dozen different customers, putting it ahead of the 777-8F, which sits somewhere in the range of 70 to 80 firm orders, depending on which recent tally you look at. Earlier in 2026, Atlas Air placed the largest A350F order yet, 20 aircraft, making it the type's biggest single customer and the first major American operator to choose Airbus over Boeing for this category of aircraft. Even more notably, Air China Cargo, another major Chinese carrier, has moved toward ordering A350 freighters from Airbus rather than Boeing, A reminder that China Southern's decision to back the 777-8F is not a universal preference across Chinese airlines. Boeing is not starting from zero, though. Qatar Airways alone has ordered more than 30 of the 777-8F, making it by far the program's anchor customer and giving Boeing a committed launch partner even before the aircraft has completed certification. Other carriers, including Lufthansa, ANA, Cargolux, Silkway West, China Airlines, and now China Southern have added their names to the order book as well. And even MSC Air Cargo, a company better known as a shipping giant than an airline, recently placed an order for 5 of the jets, pushing Boeing's total firm backlog for the 777-8F past 80 aircraft. Airbus's pitch for the A350F is built almost entirely around efficiency. The aircraft uses a large share of advanced composite material in its structure, similar to how a modern bicycle frame trades heavy steel for lightweight carbon fiber without sacrificing strength. Airbus says that shaves roughly 30 tons off the aircraft's takeoff weight compared to older generation freighters, which translates into somewhere around 20% less fuel burned and 20% lower emissions per flight. Boeing's counterargument is built around raw capacity. The 777-8F's structural payload of 118 tons edges out the A350F's 111 tons, and its range of roughly 5,000 nautical miles extends further than the A350F's roughly 4,700. So Boeing's case is essentially carry a bit more, fly a bit farther. Airbus's case is burn noticeably less fuel doing it. Neither aircraft has a knockout advantage over the other on paper, which means, in practice, airlines are not choosing purely based on specifications. They're choosing based on existing fleet relationships, financing arrangements, delivery slot availability, and long-term strategic relationships with each manufacturer. It's also worth remembering that the A350F has not exactly had a smooth ride to market either, even if it is currently ahead on orders. Airbus has pushed back the freighter's own entry into service target more than once, including a delay disclosed earlier this year tied to production problems at a major component supplier. So while Airbus likes to present itself as the steady, disciplined alternative to Boeing's very public struggles, the truth is both next-generation freighter programs have slipped from their original promises. The difference is really one of degree rather than kind. Airbus has been late by roughly a year or two. Boeing has been late by the better part of a decade, with billions upon billions of dollars in extra costs to show for it. And that is exactly the lens through which you should view China Southern's decision. This is not really a verdict on which jet is objectively better. It is a bet on which manufacturer relationship serves the airline best right now, at this particular moment, in a rapidly shifting trade and geopolitical environment. If you were running a cargo airline today and had to lock in an order right now, which aircraft would you actually bet on? The A350F or the 777-8F? Drop your answer in the comments, because we are going to check back on this later once more of these programs move closer to actually entering service. Looking at everything we have covered here, this deal represents real, tangible progress for Boeing, but it is not a finished victory just yet. The next 12 to 18 months are going to determine whether this order becomes a smart, early bet that paid off for both companies, or just another chapter in the 777X program's long and expensive history of delays and setbacks. Certification still has to happen. First flight of the freighter variant still has to happen. And Boeing still has to prove, delivery after delivery, that it can actually build and hand over these aircraft on anything close to the timeline it has promised. There's also a quieter, longer-running backdrop to all of this that is easy to miss if you only look at this one order in isolation. For years, Chinese airlines placed almost no new Boeing orders at all, a direct consequence of tariff disputes, export restrictions, and broader diplomatic friction between Washington and Beijing that stretched across multiple years. Aircraft that Boeing had already built for Chinese customers ended up parked and undelivered for extended stretches, sitting in storage while the two governments worked through their disagreements. Every Boeing delivery to China during that period became a kind of informal barometer for the state of the relationship between the two countries. So when China Southern signed this freighter order just weeks after a presidential meeting focused on easing trade tensions, industry watchers immediately read it as more than just a routine fleet planning decision. It was treated as a signal, a visible dollar-denominated sign that the door between Boeing and Chinese carriers was reopening, at least a little, after years of it being mostly shut. That broader signal matters just as much to investors and analysts as the specifics of the aircraft itself. Boeing's stock and its long-term production plans are both extremely sensitive to how much of its backlog comes from China, historically one of the single largest markets for new commercial aircraft anywhere in the world. Losing that market for an extended stretch put real pressure on Boeing's overall order book, and getting even a partial reopening, even in the cargo segment rather than passenger jets, gives Boeing something concrete to point to when it talks to investors about future growth. It is a small crack in a door that has been closed for a long time, and small cracks tend to matter a great deal in an industry where individual orders are negotiated over years and worth billions of dollars each.